In today's video, we're going to be talking about social anxiety and childhood trauma. Now, a lot of the people that I encounter in my work suffer from childhood neglect or trauma. So narcissistic parents, abusive parents, emotionally distant parents, which is why when it comes to overcoming our social anxiety, I place a high emphasis on uncovering and healing these childhood wounds, as well as gaining a deep understanding of exactly how these childhood experiences influence or even create the negative coping mechanisms we have today, self-sabotaging personality traits, and a poor self-belief. Now, one thing that you'll keep hearing me say is that our mind is not wired to perceive the world the way it is. It's wired to perceive the world the way we think it should be. Now let that sink in for a bit. Our mind is not wired to perceive the world the way it is. It is wired to perceive the world the way we think it should be. Which means that a lot of the self-belief that you formed as a kid end up becoming the lens in which you view the world and yourself for the rest of your life. So as a kid, if your parents didn't instill the right qualities so that you are able to handle adversity as well as have a good foundation for self-worth, you will end up struggling with insecurities and falling into toxic cycles for the rest of your life. So how does your parents play a part in all of this, and how do you remove those lenses? In today's video, I'm going to talk about exactly that. Before I jump right in, let me introduce myself for those who are new here. My name is Asha, and I work with people who struggle with severe social anxiety, and I help them go from feeling terrified of socializing, constantly overthinking, and feeling like they're being judged, to feeling confident, thriving socially, and finally living life the way they've always wanted to. Now, you build some of your most critical social skills from the ages 0 to 7, and you depend highly on your parents to be able to learn these social skills as well as put you in enough conducive environments to thrive socially, so that you can learn the right things and the wrong things when it comes to making friends and building connections. But on top of this, your parents also play a critical part in developing your self-worth. And why is self-worth so important when it comes to socializing? Well, if you don't have a strong self-worth, whenever you're socializing, instead of focusing on how to contribute to the conversation, you end up focusing on yourself. Am I being weird? Am I saying the right things? Am I looking stupid? Am I being unprofessional? Because subconsciously, when you don't have strong foundations for self-worth, you end up positioning yourself as deficient in your mind. Even if you develop social anxiety later on in life from an event like bullying or relationship trauma, while it is important to focus on the event that triggered it, it is also important to look back at your childhood and your parental orientation, as it plays a significant part. How? Well, the way you interpret the negative situations that happen to you, as well as how it makes you view yourself as a result, all of these instinctive patterns of perception are formed in your childhood. In fact, I would go so far as to say that having a traumatic childhood would increase your likelihood of even falling into these negative experiences in the first place. Now, while many people understand the impact of having childhood trauma, they don't realize exactly how significant this impact can be. I hear so many people saying, my parents were authoritarian, they were way too strict, I never felt like I was good enough. Or, my parents were just non-existent, they didn't parent me, so I felt like I wasn't important. But the way they say such vulnerable things, they don't say it with vulnerability. They almost talk about it as though it's a distant memory with distant emotional impact. But here's the thing, the emotional impact is very real and is very much here today. In fact, the impact of those experiences snowball over time, and the way they show up in your life is through constant self-blame, feeling anxious all the time, having an over-attached or codependent relationship style, having an avoidant relationship style, constantly feeling anxious, constantly not feeling like you're good enough. These are all symptoms, downstream effects of your childhood, which is why healing childhood wounds is such a big focus in my work. Because one thing we tend to forget is that while we are adults now, all of those traumatic experiences happen to a child, which means that child make conclusions about how the world works and how they are via a child's lens. So we don't go back and address the situation, address the fact that we interpreted those situations as a representation of our worth rather than a representation of our parents not being the parents we need them to be. And if we don't address how distorted our worldview and our self-view is as a result of these experiences, we're going to constantly have a tug of war in our mind. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean, logically, you know you should be confident, you know there's nothing wrong with you, you know that you have great friends, you have family, and you know all of these things, but somehow when you are put in those social situations, all of those get thrown out the door and suddenly you feel insecure, suddenly you feel so anxious because your subconscious mind thinks otherwise. The point I'm trying to make here is if you're trying to overcome your social anxiety, I highly suggest you start looking back into your past. Look into your childhood, looking into the relationship you had with your parents, and looking into exactly how those early experiences could have skewed your perspectives today. And once you uncover the framework in which your mind operates on, you will stop having this tug of war with yourself. And I know this is not a very easy task, which is why when you work one-on-one with me, I guide you through exactly that. Your parental orientation, your childhood, key memories, and exactly what negative coping mechanisms you created as a result. Because here's the thing, once you uncover the framework in which your subconscious operates on, your mind becomes highly receptive to change. Which is why when you see my testimonials and you see my clients, they have achieved phenomenal change within 1 or 2 sessions and overcome issues that have been plaguing them for decades because of the fact that they are able to uncover the framework in which their subconscious mind works and then replace it with something new, something effective, something more objective, a framework that pulls them up and makes them feel amazing about themselves rather than one that pulls them down. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I hope it has been informative for you and given you a lot of things to think about. As per usual, for those of you who want to work one-on-one with me and overcome your social anxiety ASAP so you can start feeling confident and finally live life the way you've always wanted to, feel free to book a strategy call with me. The link is in the description. I'll talk to you guys soon.